Hi everybody. I wanted to try this to see if this worked in hopes that we can get some of these terms down. This would be words that we would be using to talk about GDP, which is obviously going to be our conversation in the week of April 20th to the 24th. So I'm going to go through these terms and tell a couple of quick stories. I promise it won't take too long. Hopefully it helps you a little bit, as you go through. So we have GDP, and all of you guys should know what this is. We will be spending a lot of time talking about it, but it's a final dollar value because it doesn't include intermediate goods, and it's all of the goods and services that we provide in a country in a given year. It's got to be a final good. It's not an intermediate good. So it's not the chicken that Kentucky Fried Chicken uses to serve up to their customers. That is included in the final price. It's not the tires that Ford puts on their cars. That'll be included in the final price. When we talk about intermediate goods, those do not count. The final good is the one that counts. And the final user can only be one of four entities: a household, a business, the government, or somebody from another country. Intermediate products are products that become part of the final good or services I just had mentioned. So parts to a cell phone would be considered intermediate products. You'll be paying for them when you buy their final product. So I have an Apple phone. All of the screen and all of the buttons and all the plastic and all the computer gadgets that go in it are intermediate products. It doesn't count when Apple buys them because I'll be paying for them in the price that I pay for the good. That's the difference between intermediate and final products. Two approaches to adding up GDP. This is the expenditures approach, which we'll spend the most amount of time on. It's C plus I sub G plus G plus X events. We're talking about the four components of aggregate demand. Who can buy something? Households, businesses, governments, people from other countries. Consumption is simply household purchases. That's C. All of the things that we buy would be considered consumption. Investment is business spending. What do they spend money on? Notice that new homes pops up on here. New homes are considered investment, not consumption. So a household doesn't buy a house. Houses are considered business spending. Government purchases, a third component of aggregate demand, or G, goods and services bought by any level of the government, and they buy all kinds of things, but those would all be considered G. Exports are the difference between are goods and services that are shipped out. We like that. We want to make them and ship them out to other countries. They do count on our GDP, and we'll talk about X sub N in just a second. Imports are goods coming in. We all have them. We all buy them. We all use them. Those count on the GDP of another country. They do not count on our GDP. The income approach, I call it Weasel plus is red because that's how I learned it. It's not all the things we buy. It's all of the inputs or input cost we use to make them. So this would include wages, profits, interest, and rents. Remember when we did factors of production in the circular flow model, we talked about how you made money. Well, if you sell your labor, it's a wage. That's the primary part of it. So you also include in that interest and rents as well as profits. Underground economy does not count as part of GDP. We'll spend some time talking about this week as well. It is stuff that the government does not have the ability to tax for the most part, so it doesn't count on GDP because they have no way of accounting for it. Nominal GDP is non-inflation adjusted GDP. It's the good at the current dollar price this year. So if I go buy $10 worth of gas from Casey's at $2.39 a gallon, that $23.90 would be included in nominal GDP for that year. I bought it. I'm a household. I'm the final purchaser of it. Now if I bought that gas and I was an insurance salesman, it would be considered an intermediate good. Those are the things that we'll be spending time looking at this week when we talk about GDP. And lastly, real GDP is how we are going to take out inflation. We've already done this a little bit when we did this past week with real incomes. We talked about inflation and the inflation week. So real is just inflation adjusted, a very important term for all of you guys to learn. Lastly, as we go through all of this, remember that on Wednesday, all of these terms, you'll be asked to use definitions, and we'll also talk a little bit about what counts and what doesn't count on GDP as part of a formative assessment.